We're going to be on a fairly strict schedule, but the main thing that we're going to be wanting to do is have a lot of interaction between the audience and these guys. These guys are a wealth of knowledge. The whole idea here is for you to cover areas that you generally don't talk about in day-to-day life, but we're going to, allow you to do that here. So the people we have here on the creation side is Dennis Marciano, Marcelino, Brandon Church, Bernie Daler, and Dan.
I'm not going to help you. You're going to
Mangum?
That's good. Yeah, very good.
Mangled?
Mangle my
You actually got my name wrong, but I'm the
Yeah, whatever.
You said on the creation side, then you just went to all
Bernie,
four of
how's
us.
that?
Yeah.
Bernie and Dan.
We're going to start with the creation side. They're going to go for 10 minutes, and then these guys go for 10 minutes, and then we're going to open up to questions, so get your questions ready. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I want to start by thanking you all for coming out. I want to thank Bernie and Dan for being willing to do this, and Dennis as well. And I hope you guys get a lot out of this. About 400 years ago, Isaac Newton put forward his theory of gravitation. Now, it was a good theory, successful theory. It was verified countless times, and eventually became a law. But around 100 years ago, Einstein challenged it. His theory of general relativity said gravity was not just a force that attracted things, it was due to the curvature of space-time. It's kind of a strange idea, and he did have his skeptics. But Einstein proposed 3 tests. He said, if my theories are true, we should find these 3 things to be true. And in the years that followed, we did find those things to be true. So Einstein's theory was accepted by the scientific community. That's how science is supposed to work. A new theory challenges an old theory, and maybe there's skeptics, that's fine. But the new theory is tested, and if it passes the test of the evidence, it's accepted. Unfortunately, that's not always how science works. In 1915, Alfred Wegener put forward his theory on continental drift. It was also a good theory, backed by quite a bit of evidence. In fact, scientists now generally accept continental drift and the larger theory of plate tectonics. What Wegener proposed was essentially right. But at the time, his theory was vehemently rejected. Scientists ignored the evidence, even attacked Wegener personally. They did not respond to it intellectually, they reacted to it emotionally. A very good book on this subject is The Rejection of Continental Drift by Naomi Oreskes. Oreskes, who's not a creationist, by the way, but she documented just how hostile the scientific community was to Wegener. Why? Why were they so unfair to him? Well, according to Oreskes, it's because they did not want to believe the continents could move. It sounded too catastrophic. Geologists have spent around 200 years trying to get away from the belief that Noah's flood had any kind of a real impact on the earth. So when Wegener suggested the crust of the earth could move, it felt like a step backwards, and they could not abide by that. It took them half a century to finally accept the mounting evidence for plate tectonics. That is not how science is supposed to work. A cherished theory is challenged, but instead of investigating it properly, the skeptics ignore the data, they attack the challengers. Unfortunately, that is how science seems to work a lot. The fact is, everyone has bias. No one can look at a piece of evidence 100% objectively, even scientists. Everyone has some starting idea when they approach the data. If the data shows them what they think it should, they easily accept it. But if the data doesn't, they can be very skeptical, sometimes even hostile. There's a lot more examples I could give. In the 1960s, astronomer Halton Arp wrote a book documenting numerous objects in space doing things they should not be doing if the Big Bang Theory was true. Did the scientific community investigate this data fairly? No. Instead, Arp was no longer allowed back at his observatory. He went on to write more books documenting more of this data, also writing about how unfairly he's been treated. And book reviews in journals like Sky and Telescopes agree that Arp has been treated very unfairly. In the 1980s, some astronomers started mapping the large-scale structure of the universe, and it looks like the galaxies and clusters are laid out in a series of shells with our galaxy at the center of it. It looks like we're at the center of the universe. You could do a Google search, a Google image search for SDSS. You'll see what I mean, SDSS. But that seems to suggest we're in a special place, and the scientific community does not like that. So even to this day, a lot of scientists are ignoring the data. Arp actually co-authored an article that appeared in New Scientist magazine 2004. It was a scathing critique of the Big Bang, pointing out several holes in the theory and discussing how the scientific community criticizes people who oppose the theory. It says in part, quote, "In cosmology today, doubt and dissent are not tolerated, and young scientists learn to remain silent if they have something negative to say about the standard Big Bang model. Those who doubt the Big Bang fear that saying so will cost them their funding." This article was originally signed by 34 scientists. Since then, it's been put up on the web at cosmologystatement.org. It now has over 500 signatures from people, institutions, and universities all over the world. But again, as far as I can tell, the scientific community is largely ignoring it. Here's another website, dissentfromdarwin.org. Has a very simple statement. "We are skeptical of claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged." That's what it says. The statement now has over 19 pages of signatories, also coming from universities and institutions all over the world. But again, as far as I can tell, most scientists are ignoring this. That is not how science is supposed to work. Creationists have documented this a lot, how the scientific community refuses to even investigate evidence against evolution. That's why the theory looks well supported when in reality it's in shambles.
Okay, to extend on Brandon's point there, it's true that a lot of us have worldviews. We have a presupposition, a hypothesis if you want, that says that, you know, God created the universe or there is no God. And so to support Brandon's point about how far out it can get, in Physics Today, which is a secular magazine, there was an article called Teaching and Propaganda, and a highly educated college professor was very honest when he said, and this is a quote, "And I use that trust," that he says that his students put a trust in him, "I use that trust to effectively brainwash them. And our teaching methods are primarily those of propaganda. We appeal without demonstration to evidence that supports our position. We only introduce arguments and evidence that supports the currently accepted theories and omit or gloss over any evidence to the contrary." And then if you want to take it to the real extreme, Adolf Hitler said, "If you tell a lie long enough, loud enough, and often enough, people will believe it. People are more likely to believe a big lie than a small one." So that just shows how far out things can go. But one thing I like about Bernie, and we've done a few of these things together, you know, TV shows and stuff, is that we're both kind of committed to the truth. We really don't care where it lands.
1 minute.
What? I have 1 minute? Did he go over 5?
50 seconds now.
Oh, jeez, I haven't even started the proofs yet.
We started 2 minutes late.
Thank you.
45 seconds.
Plus, okay. So yeah, let me just, I'm gonna run by the scientific specifics as to why I see a creation and not an evolution. Okay, there's something called the dating game, and then I'll expand on them as we go over. There's a dating game, and my chart of errors here shows that they aren't reliable. The top dating institutions, and you can come up and see those later, say that there have been many errors. And I can get specific on them, but we don't have the time, obviously. Part of the dating game is like carbon-14 shows up in diamonds, even diamonds that's 100 miles down. So there should be no carbon-14 in diamonds, which is supposed to be millions of years old, because the carbon dating system only goes up to 60,000 years. Recently in Stanford and Purdue, and the RATE project shows that the radiometric dating system is not reliable. So, and then they're finding dinosaurs now, dinosaur fossils with soft flesh on them and carbon-14. So dinosaurs can't be millions of years old. Okay, then there's the evolution hoaxes and misinterpretations. You've probably seen this in the biology books. You've probably seen that one in biology books, how invertebrates evolved. They all kind of start out the same, and then they go to whatever they're supposed to be, humans, pigs, whatever. Well, the guy, Haeckel, the guy who did that, was eventually tried and convicted of fraud because he actually drew those. These weren't photographs. These are the actual photographs of what those embryos look like on the bottom row. That's what he did, was the top row, and he's not on the bottom row. Okay, then there's all the supposed missing links, like Nebraska man, Piltdown man, Neanderthal, they all turn out to be humans or animals. Then there's the geologic proofs. Mount St. Helens, for instance, the Grand Canyon was supposed to take millions of years to form all that strata. Well, Mount St. Helens formed them in one day on one occasion, and yet they had a number of strata, 150 feet of strata. And then in the geologic column, human remains are found deep within the column. There's an absence of meteorites, which should be there, the number that we find now. There's something called polystrates, which are trees that go through the column, upside down and right side up. And so that shouldn't be. And then there's Earth's decaying magnetic field.
Evolution.
Okay.
That's it.
You guys said 10 minutes, so that's.
Yeah, no, you said 10 minutes.
That was a long
I
1
wanted to
minute.
go longer.
Okay. All right, everybody, now you're going to hear the correct viewpoint on how to interpret science. So this was the creationist side, and Dan and I are going to talk about the evolutionist side. And okay, so here we go. And by the way, I have a handout, and on here I have a link at the very top. So after this, you can go there and get, you can click on a bunch of links I have for all the things I'm going to talk about, and you can actually see more because I'm just going to give some excerpts of quotes and things. Okay, so I was raised as a Catholic, and I had assumed evolution was true. I never heard anything to the contrary growing up. In college, I got born again. I learned that evolution was against the Bible. I tended to be a mixture of young earth creationism, old earth creationism. That's because neither one made sense to me trying to figure out with the Bible, so I mixed the two together. And also intelligent design, which came to be popular just a few years ago, from what I could tell. I then studied evolution because I like to debate with atheists and different people, and I came to accept the evidence for evolution. I was about ready to leave Christianity at that point. Evolution was a big part of that. Another part was dealing with neurology and studies of the brain. So anyway, evolution basically covers everything from how the Big Bang started, from multiverse theory all the way to how life came, how the stars and planets came to be, and then life arose from that. So biological evolution was a big reason for me leaving the faith, but I want to stress this point. There's plenty of evangelical Christian theologians who accept all of modern science, which means fully accepting naturalistic biological evolution, which is explaining the creation of humans from animals, and even multiverse theory, explaining the origin of the universe. And because this point is so important, I want to stress it again. And if I could underline my words verbally, here we go. Many prominent evangelical theologians and preachers fully accept biological evolution for the creation of humans. One of my role models as an evangelical theologian is Dennis Lamoureux. He's a professor in Canada, and this is a book he wrote called Evolutionary Creationism. And he says, well, I'll talk more about that later. Okay. So anyway, I have a list of people here that fully accept evolution, like Dennis Lamoureux, Nancy Murphy, and even Discover Institute's Michael Behe. And then the Catholic Church says they have no objection to biological evolution as long as you say a soul, God made a soul. And then also Billy Graham is somebody who said this is not an issue for Christians. Okay, so at the bottom I have some overwhelming evidence that I see. One is pseudogenes on this left picture, and the other one is fused human chromosome number 2. We can talk about this during the Q&A session if you have questions. For example, on the pseudogene chart, that one at the bottom means all these creatures, the orangutan, gorilla, and chimp, and human, all got this. But when you go up to the 3 and the second 3, only the chimp and the human have this. And then the last 15 other human, only the humans have these pseudogenes. So this shows that not only is the DNA similar, but there's also a descent pattern. So either humans descended from animals, or else God is trying to deceive us.
Okay, and with that, I'll sort of take over. So let me first talk a little bit more about myself. Like Bernie, I was raised in a religious atmosphere. I believed in God. The concept of not believing in God was never even a thought in my mind. But my dad also was a scientist. He taught biology at a university in California. And he taught biology, botany, and other sciences. So those two together were very natural for me and very compatible. I had no problem enjoying everything I learned about science. and never once question God. And Bernie made some points about that, and I think it can't be stressed enough. And so I'm going to reiterate some of those